What's up? It's been a long time. How y'all feeling? Everybody alright? Cool. I like this little social media thing. The Grays. How are you all? So, I don't want to take up too much of everybody's time. But let me set the context for what I'm about to say. I quit rap. Quit, I'm done. No, I'm joking. Rap for life. But no, seriously, let me set the context for what I'm about to say. For you all who know me, either personally or professionally, y'all know I get in a lot of trouble. And a lot of times the trouble comes not even from what the initial issue at hand is about or what it was, right? I get in trouble along the way of talking about the issue. And the issue that I might get in trouble about might even have nothing to do with the initial event, right? It might be the way that a blogger reported it. It may be like a tweet, a very specific tweet that got retweeted and got picked up by somebody who doesn't even know me, who's not even like a fan, who doesn't follow me. They might follow the person who retweeted it, and they see that tweet and it kind of strikes them a certain way, and then they retweet it, and people who follow them, who don't care about me professionally, personally anyway, then they pick it up and they run with it. And eventually it just becomes like this big story about a very small piece of a bigger conversation. And that one piece probably had nothing to do with the conversation at hand. And things just kind of spread and kind of go crazy. So I've been dealing with this since 2007, 2006, actually, with Food and Liquor. Started at Food and Liquor. Whoever leaked Food and Liquor, like, started this whole, I blame it on them. Started this whole kind of uphill battle that I've been fighting for my narrative, for the narrative that is Lupe Fiasco. And most of the time I just let it slide. Sometimes you'll see me come out and say something, or you'll see me kind of rant about it. And that just kind of adds fuel to the fire. Then eventually it dies down. And then somebody will come days after and maybe repost. That's why I don't do interviews or really rock with a lot of bloggers. Because they'll come after the fact, focus on one piece of the conversation, make that the headline. Then it becomes this cascade of things. And before you know it, in real life, I have these issues with people of not want to book me for shows, or seeing me in the streets and trying to get, like trying to sun me or something like that. Or just the chatter behind the scenes. Or even fans who like, man, I like the album, but I never knew you felt like that. It's like, you didn't even listen to the album, because everything that I said was on the album too. But to pull it all back in, I want to just do a service to the fans who might see something, or the people who are not fans, and they see something and then they just kind of run with it, and they shocked that I would be able to say something like that, or shocked that I would respond to somebody in a certain way. And it's really because they don't really know too much about me beyond the music. They're not checking the Wikipedia page. They're not even really reading the articles. They don't really care about the bio. A lot of my career was kind of prior, at the birth of the internet. So it wasn't no Instagram Live. There was no Twitter. There was no way for you to really get into the intimate aspects of my life. And I've never really allowed people into the intimate aspects of my life. So you don't really know. I don't have like a memoir. There's no documentaries about me. There's none of that, right? And all that stuff that did get covered, you can't even find it. One of my first interviews was in 2003 on MTV, and I can't even find it. So with all that to say, I want to give a shout out to Kojima Productions and Death Stranding. And I want to thank a lot of the fans, or non-fans, or just the community of Death Stranding folks who are building all of those bridges and nice highways and delivering my packages and stuff for me. I really appreciate that. I apologize that I can't really return the favor because I really don't know how to build the highways and the bridges. So shout out to the people that are actually in the game building bridges, and every time I log in, there's a new. I got the shirts. Got the shirts. There's a new piece of the game in there. So shout out to Kojima Productions. If you don't have Death Stranding, you should go pick it up. It's an amazing game, and I'm knee deep in it. So anyway, back to it. Back to the realness of this. Let this soak. So a couple days ago, I actually wanted a Sosa IT asked me a question on Twitter regarding education. We're talking about education, and it was actually about. It started with college debt, right? Which I won't rehash. I'm not going to get into that. But in the process of talking about college debt, we're talking about education. He mentioned something about college debt and what I thought about it, and I wasn't kind of going to say anything, but I was like, it's interesting. I have a point of view about it. Here you go. That kind of snowballed into people asking different questions, kind of posting their different point of views. People who are currently in college debt, people who never went to college like me, and just an interesting kind of conversation about people's points of views, and hopefully, if not necessarily a solution to college debt, but a way that you can think about it before you decide to go into college and at what level. And if you're already in college debt, maybe there's a way you can think about college debt without getting depressed or getting upset or feeling like you're a slave or feeling like you're trapped, which is worse than the debt, actually. It does more damage than being in debt. Cripple yourself in all type of psychological ways. But anyway, that led to a comment about, well, if somebody brought up the institutions or the school systems in other countries, right? And so there's this myth that the school systems in other countries are quote unquote free, and that you can just go to any college you want, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not saying that that's untrue, but it's a myth in terms of it's not that simple, because those schools are not free. Like, you actually pay for them. The community at large pays for them, because a lot of those European schools or Canadian school systems, wherever there's free education, quote unquote free education, the taxes are extremely high, right? So the taxes you pay as an individual to finance those systems are extremely high, right? So that's kind of the trade-off. And there's no real guarantee that you're going to get a better education, quote unquote, a better, more quality education. It all depends on, how focused you are as a student, and what your capacities are to learn and to apply what you learn. But anyway, the response to that person was, move, right? Go to those other countries and go to school there, right? And that led to that kind of went into a comment about me saying, the dude responded and was like, well, you move. And it's like, look, if the first opportunity that I get to move to Japan, I'm gone, right? I'm moving to Japan in a heartbeat. And I made the comment because, I love Japan, and I'm culturally, I'm more Japanese than I am African. And that comment right there, was sent a shockwave through people. It sent a shockwave through fans. It sent a shockwave through people who were, I guess, African. It sent a shockwave through people who are African American. No Japanese people, though, I don't think. They were kind of cool with it. And it led to a lot of kind of people being confused and why would I say something like that? People kind of spent it as me denigrating Africa in some way, bigging up Japan, putting Japan over Africa. And I didn't do any of that. I didn't, in my follow-up responses to different people, I tried to clarify my position and also kind of let people know, who I am beyond just Lupe Fiasco, beyond just the music, right? And it led to different people, again, people just saw that tweet who aren't Lupe fans and or don't even follow me, and then kind of retweeted it and chimed into the conversation, and kind of came with all these different angles. And if you see that, it's still all up on the Twitter page. You see me kind of responding and attacking and cutting people down and stuff like that. And when people got personal and start to cuss and like get the fuck out of here and all this other kind of making accusations and stuff like that, you know, I'm not a completely docile, peaceful person. I'm a mirror. What you show me, I'll show you back. If you want to troll, I can troll. You want to be an asshole, I can be an asshole. If you want to have really thoughtful, intelligent conversation, I'll do that with you. If you want to get gangsta in the streets, I'll get gangsta in the streets with you. I'll do whatever you feel is best for you to get what you need out of the circumstance. So it kind of snowballed into a bunch of stuff. And 2 days worth of kind of back and forth with particular individuals, coming out with all type of comments and questions. And it went into what is, you know, African culture and what is Africa, and you shouldn't use terms like sub-Sahara and like all these other kind of pieces and parts, and me kind of throwing out places I've been, and in that process people get upset because I mentioned this place versus that place, and trying to give people a history of what this word means and what that word means. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this shit. I want to play Death Stranding, and also I want to, I'm studying modern Christianity right now, which is super interesting. But it was on my mind, and I feel like, you know what? Let me talk about this and really kind of bring it to a head without it being caught up in kind of the misconceptions of Twitter and a response that you may not see, or retweet or comment that you may not see, or you may not even care about Lupe Fiasco and you don't know my history. So I was like, you know what? Let me give people my history, right? My Africa story, as I call it, right? And for me personally, it's very easy for me because a lot of literally my most basic parts tell my story and my relationship to Africa in a very direct way, right? So let's start at the very beginning. At the very beginning, my name, my real name is Wasalu. Wasalu, right? It's not Thomas. It's not George, James, Jermaine, Tremaine, Dante, Devon, Shaquan, none of that. My name is Wasalu, right? My father named me that as a baby, right? It's not a name that I picked up after having read some book or meeting with some group of Pan-Africanists or anything like that. Being in some African store, or going to an African festival, or going to Kwanzaa and seeing none of that, right? My name was given to me by my father when I was a baby, Wasalu, and it's African. It's an African name, right? It's not a nickname. It's my real name. And my father told me that it meant warrior, right? Also, it was a city in Africa, right? All of that is unfounded. I don't know, right? Because as much as I try and search it, I can't find anything about Wasalu. I heard it one time in a song at this Moroccan restaurant, and it was this belly dancer, and the song that they were playing was called Wasalu. And then my stepfather, who went to Zimbabwe a lot, he brought me back a bunch of Zimbabwean music and hip hop and music from Africa when I was a young teenager. And there was a song that was it Wasalu? I think I might have mentioned Wasalu. It was Fiasco, but anyway, cut that part. And then the only other Wasalu that I know was my father's army buddy, who he named me after, right? So he named me after this dude named Wasalu, who was black, right? And my father was black. My mom, black. So my name is Wasalu, right? It's African. All of the Jermaines and Tremaines and Seans and Dantes and Larrys, all of you people out there who had those Judeo-Christian normal, quote-unquote normal names, or those kind of quasi-made-up names where you put Quan and Sean together and your mother's name is Juanita and your father's name is Sean, so you become Shaquan, all those kind of compound names. all of y'all in school made fun of Wasalu, right? So I had to fight from the very beginning against other black kids with quote unquote normal names because I had this African name. So I was Wash the Shoe, Basalu, like I just all the things that you think about as a badass little kid in 2nd or 3rd grade, making fun of the kid with the weirdest name in class, right? So that was my name. I have an African name. My middle name is Muhammad. It's Muslim, it's Islamic. My father and my mother were both Muslim, and they gave me a Muslim middle name. So I'm named after the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, Muhammad. My last name is Jaco, Jaco, okay? Jaco. Jaco is Spanish. It's a Spanish name, right? It's actually pronounced Jaco, as if it was like Jalisco, and with the silent or the H sounding J, right? So I have a Spanish last name, Wasalu Muhammad Jaco. Nothing about my name is American. Nothing about it is Christian, right? Nothing about it is anything quote unquote normal. And it also represents 3 completely different cultures, right? Wasalu being this African, Muhammad being this kind of Arab kind of thing, and then Jaco being this weird Spanish situation, which could have been Mexico, South America, what have you, right? So nothing about my name in general plants me in anything Western. None of it, right? So as you think about your own name, and you think about where does your name take you, for a lot of you all, your name takes you to the Bible. It takes you to Europe. You're named after some saint or some figure in the Bible. And almost a majority of every person named in America has the same kind of story. Unless you're from Africa, right? Or unless you're from Japan, or unless you're from Asia, unless you're from some other part of the country or other part of the world, or you're Native American, or you're something like that. If you're just kind of a standard, born and raised in an American city, and your name is like George, like you're named after a king in England, right? But anyway, belay that point. So that's my real name, Wasalu Muhammad Jaco. To add more fuel to this, my little sister, her name, her real name on her birth certificate is Africa, right? My mother and my father named my little sister Africa. Her name is literally Africa, right? But spelled with a K, not with a C. Africa, that's her name, Africa. She's named after this place, this continent, this cradle of civilization is my little sister's name, right? That's just another kind of add-on for those folks who think that I'm like, you dissed Africa. It's like my sister's name is Africa, like real name. And these aren't names that we picked up after some conversion or some transformation. These were names that we were born with as kids, as babies, that our parents gave to us. This isn't something that we chose after some awakening in college or attending some African American studies class, right? Or joining some group, right? Some Black Power group or something like that. It's like, no, this is before we even knew what any of that was. We were given these names. To continue this kind of this talk about names, Lupe Fiasco, my rap name, right? My rap name. People are like, oh man, that you trying to be Mexican, right? It's like this push for that I'm trying to be everything but black, or I'm trying to be everything but that's related to my culture. And I'm kind of hopefully dispelling a lot of this with just the basics of just my name. I ain't even got to do all of the things that I've studied and learned and seen in places I've been. I could just hopefully dispel a lot of this with my names, right? First of all, Lupe Fiasco, Guadalupe, which is the entirety of that word, Guadalupe, right? For a lot of you, you relate it to Mexico. Say, oh, it's Mexico, right? You're trying to be Mexican. And to be honest, when I was in about like 7th, 8th, 9th grade, when I went to school with a bunch of Mexicans, I wanted to be Mexican. because the Mexicans were cool, right? They had the cool Lowrider magazine. They had the best looking cars. The women was fine, right? One of my first girlfriends in high school was actually Mexican. And I like to just be in the culture and speak the language, and it was just cool. But I had a ton of black friends. My name was still Wasalu. I was still this nappy head black kid. Had a bunch of white friends, had a bunch of black friends. My first quote unquote real friend in life was actually this white kid named Michael who lived next door to us. But I had a ton of black friends, but I had Mexican friends, right? And when I got to high school, I went to theater, and the guy that I did theater with, my theater partner, his name was Guadalupe, right? Which is weird because people think Guadalupe is like this woman's name, like Lupe is a woman's name. It's actually non-gendered, right? Because Guadalupe isn't the name of a person, right? People relate it to the Virgin Mary, the Mary of Guadalupe. Guadalupe is actually a town in Mexico, right? A lot of people are named after this town because of this supposed sighting of the Virgin Mary. So it's a very holy place. So people want to tap into that holiness. So it becomes like how your name is Michael, or because your parents want you to be like the Archangel Michael, or your name is Mary, or your name is Sarah, or your name is Rebecca, or your name is Samantha, or something like that, right? I think Samantha is a biblical name. But all these biblical names because people want to tie you back to your religion, right? The Christian religion. Guadalupe, though, isn't Christian. Matter of fact, Guadalupe isn't Spanish, right? So what? It's not Spanish? Yeah, it's Spanish, but not how you think. It's a Spanish corruption of something Arab. It's an Arab name. It's an Arab word. It's two Arab roots kind of put together, right? Well, Arab and Latin, right? And for you all out there who these super African royalist, African kind of interested in the history of African, basically Africans taking over shit. And a lot of you equate yourselves or try and make yourselves out to be Moors. You know, a lot of you run around talking about that. Oh, I'm Moorish. I'm a Moor. I have Moorish blood. I want to live the Moorish lifestyle. The Moorish traditions are what gives us this newfound identity of royalty and conquer and being a king and being intelligent, and we showed Europe how to flush toilets, and we brought the enlightenment to them. They were living in the dark ages. The Moors, right? And ask yourself, where did the Moors go? What are the Moors synonymous with? They're synonymous with Spain, right? But who were the Moors? The Moors were not Christian. The Moors were not some indigenous African religion. The Moors were Muslims, right? They were, in some cases, Arabs, right? But in all cases, Muslims, right? And they're part of the Andalusian conquest, and they left northern Africa, which was all conquered by Islam, and they moved into Europe, into Spain, and they ruled Spain for 800 years, right? In that time, there was a lot of borrowing of Arabic words into the Spanish language, into the Spanish vernacular, right? One of those words was the word for river. The word for river to this day is wadi. Wadi, it's the Arab word wadi, W-A-D-I, or a river bed is called a wadi. Wolf is lubo or lupine, right? Or loop. That's lupo is wolf. When you put those two things together, you get wadi loop. Out of a person speaking Spanish, or the way it's spelled, or just from an accent, they might say Guadi, Guadialup, Guadialup, Guadalupe means river of the wolf. It's Moorish, right? It's a blend of it's a blend of Spanish and Arab. The only place that took place, those blends of Spanish and Arab, were with the Moors. The Moors were black. And it came from Africa. So even my rap name, which I got from a guy who was Colombian, turns out to be a Moorish word. Again, another connectivity back to Africa, back to understanding the history of the culture and where I come from, all bottled up in just my names before we even get into the things I've seen, the places I've been, the people I've talked to, who are my friends, etc. So just in my names alone, there's a direct relationship back to the mother continent and all of its historical aspects and the things that made it great. But for you all who didn't know that, for you, Lupe is just me trying to be Mexican. Which is cool, right? Because there's things we're ignorant to. There's a lot of people in Mexico who don't know that. Who don't know that Guadalupe is actually Moorish. Right? It's a Spanish kind of, I don't want to say corruption, but kind of a Spanish pronunciation of Wadi Alub, right? The river of the wolf, right? Which is actually a river in Spain, right? That the Moors named. That's why it's called Wadi instead of Rio, right? Because there's Rio Grande, which means river, right? But this is called Wadi. That's one piece, right? My name is African. My real name is African, not my made-up name, not the name that I got from an African history professor or naming myself after some African king 1,000 years later. That's my real name. My little sister's name is Africa, right? She's one of the most meaningful persons in my life, and she's named after the motherland for a reason. And she espouses a lot of the values, which I think a lot of young people could learn, right? Even my rap name, which I named myself, right, after a really great person who just happened to be Colombian, the etymology and the history of that name goes all the way back to Africa. Again, goes back to Moorish, Spain, and African pursuits of spreading Islam throughout Europe, right? One part. 2 parts. I have been to Africa. I have been to Africa. Raise your hand if you've been to Africa. I've been to Africa. Me, I've been to Africa. A little bit of advice. Before you read a book about Africa, it doesn't matter if it's written by a white person. It doesn't matter if it's written by an African person. It doesn't matter if it's in Prentice Hall, kind of a textbook at school in your social studies class. If it's something that's some small print house in Oakland written by some ex-Black Panther who changed his name 6 times, was born Clarence, now his name is Ntumbe Asadunde or something like that, who has this strange Kemetic Egyptian situation on the cover, which is cool, knock yourself out. But before you read any of those books, take the money that you're going to use to buy that book, put it in a savings account, and save until you get enough money and go to Africa. Go there. You cannot know Africa through a book. You can watch documentaries, but you cannot know Africa through a documentary. Right? The same way that you can't know America by watching a movie. Right? You can't know America by watching Netflix. You can't know America by reading a book. Right? You have to go to it. You have to travel through it. You have to get in your car and go from state to state, town to town, see people, see how things are the same, see how things are different, eat the food, right? Get harassed by the cops in this place, get thanked and saved by the cops in another place. You got to travel this whole country to really get an understanding. It cannot be encapsulated and described in a book. I don't care who wrote it, how smart they are, how thick it is, how much it costs, right? Or from what secret Gnostic Illuminati fighting African bookstore that you bought it from. It is not going to give you a full and clear experience and understanding about what Africa is. You have to go there. Here's the other side. Even when you go there, you're still not going to be able to get or attain a full picture of Africa. You're not. It's Africans who live in Africa who do not have a full picture of what Africa is. Why? Because Africa is fucking huge. And I'm talking geographically huge. I'm talking size-wise. It is humongous. Right? You can put America, the entirety of America, into upper portions, into the Sahara Desert, I think multiple times. Right? We're not even getting into Southern Africa, Central Africa, West Africa, East Africa, the islands around Africa. We're not even getting into that, right? Africa is a big ass place, right? Just by the nature of its geography. Traversing it successfully, going to all the places in Africa, in and of itself is you could spend your entire life traveling through Africa. Right? It's huge. It's a huge place. Multiple cities, multiple cultural, multiple ethnic groups, multiple tribal groups, multiple religions, multiple languages, right? Not even getting into the cultures. Multiple cultures, multiple hairstyles, multiple ways of dressing, multiple ways of eating, just a myriad of things that is constant, right? And it's constantly changing and constantly shifting, right? And has been doing that for thousands of years. So you cannot point to a specific frozen period of time and say that is Africa at this time, right? Because you cannot take into consideration that, yeah, you're pointing at a specific place in Africa that may have had its own kind of cultural shift, but that's just one place out of thousands, right? And that one place may not be connected in any way, shape, or form with another place just across the border, and then the place that's across the border from that, and then the place that's down the river from that, and the place that's up the river from that, and the place that's across the lake from that, and the place that's across the delta from that, and then the place that's across the mountains from that, and then the place that's across the hills from that, and then the place that's across the savannah from that, and then the place that's across the forest from that, and then the place across the mountains again from that, and then across the places. It's vast and massive, right? And its terrain. Its cultural terrain is just as if even more vast and massive, and is constantly changing. There's constant political uprisings. There's constant political downfalls. There's constant maintenances of certain superstitious and religious traditions and etc. That blend, that hit a Christian wall at a certain place, and then that blends and becomes this weird thing. Then that hits a Muslim kind of period of area, then that blends and that becomes something else. Then this hits a secular region, then this may hit some type of other region, and this hits that, and it just kind of goes and flows and goes and flows and flows and goes and goes and goes and goes, right? And that's why there's this statement that they say about Africa. They say TIA, right? They say TIA. This is Africa, and they make that statement because it's like, I don't understand what's going on right now. Like this, right? Just 10 minutes ago, this place was super calm and super normal. 10 minutes later, this place just exploded into chaos. And when you ask a local, they'll be like, oh, TIA, this is Africa, right? It's constantly shifting, constantly changing. A lot of the things that you think about Africa are half the story, a quarter of the story, right? It's the same thing that I thought before I went to Japan. When I was 14 and wanted to go to Japan, I just thought everybody in Japan walked around with samurai swords. I thought everybody did karate, right? I thought that it was like sushi and bowing everywhere, right? And I thought it was just neon lights, That was my picture of Japan, right? And I was trying to teach myself Japanese, and I was like, I'm going to go to Japan, and I'm going to be a samurai in Japan. And the first time I went to Japan, it was like, yo, they got Nikes and Jordans, and there's y'all got McDonald's, and what? Right? Kind of completely blew my mind. And the same exact thing happened when I went to Africa, right? Went to Africa, get off the plane, burst into tears because I'm home, walk off the plane, get into the little holding area, and the first thing I see is soap operas. It's like, soap operas? Like, where are the drummers? Where are the dancers? Where are the, where's the African cloth? This dude has a suit on. This place has like air conditioning. Like I thought we were supposed to, what's happening, right? This soap opera is a soap opera is crazy. Like, yeah, we got, got soap operas. It's like, yeah, but it was a mind fuck, right? Your expectations and what you think about these places is a quarter true. The rest, right, is what the place actually is about. The books can't teach you. The books can't show you. They can give you hints. They can act as a guide, as a primer, but you should never fully allow yourself to know a place through a book. You have to go meet the people. You have to eat the food. You got to get sick, right? You got to really realize, I really shouldn't drink this water, or I really shouldn't buy this shit off the street. I should really be careful because I could get and not just you, actual other Africans the same way, right? You have to be walking through the street. You got to get somebody trying to sell you some shit 10 times the price, right? You got to experience a smile from somebody who you never thought would smile at you. You got to experience a brotherhood with people who you thought would never be your brothers. And you got to experience people who don't fuck with you, right? Because you're American, or you're different, or you're strange. And they know that you're not African. And you think we all black. It's like, nah, bruh. You not African. You an American. We can tell. Right? You're like, wow, y'all can tell I'm American? And yes. We know you not from around here. Right? The same way if you go to any neighborhood in whatever city you in and you've never been there before, people seem like, yeah, he not from around here. They know. Right? So it's not this immediate embrace. It's not an immediately welcoming you into things. It's not what you think it is. Right? Go to Africa. I've been there. I've seen it. I've touched it. I've smelled it. I've cried it. I've helped it. I've helped build things there. Right? There's parts of it that I really don't like. I really don't like the way certain things are handled there. I don't like the way certain people behave there. There's other parts that I love to death, that I would die for, literally die for, right? And there's other parts where I wouldn't even step foot or put a dime into, right? Because it's so corrupt, right? Because there's parts of it that are super violent, right? And there's parts of it that have problems above and beyond. I'm talking 1,000-year-old problems, right? Not issues of colonialism of the Germans or the French or this like that. I mean, tribal issues that are thousands of years old that are why are y'all still fighting about this? Right? So it's a lot. Africa's a huge place. It's a big place, right? Be careful where you go, but go. Experience it, learn it, love it, hate it. Build up your own perspective about what it is. Don't get caught up in just the myths of what you think it should be, right? Because I guarantee you, all of what you think about it is going to get washed away as soon as you get to the airport. As soon as you land in the airport and you realize that it's not this, and you're going to kind of shut that off and just kind of take that as okay, but you're not going to let that get you down, and you're going to get off into a certain part that you like, and then you're going to see parts that you really don't like, and then you're going to come back to America and be like, man, I really appreciate living in America. You're going to do that. Not that I hate Africa, right? Not that, oh man, I can't, everything that they said about Africa was a lie. It's just that you're going to gain an appreciation for the benefits, right? And the opportunities that you have, right? that other Africans want. A huge quote unquote problem in Africa is migration. People feeling, and rightfully so, that they have opportunity elsewhere. And there's other groups in Africa who want to keep people within Africa and call them all, they're traitors to their race. They're this, they're that. They're bad people because they want to go to Europe. They want to be like the Europeans. They want to go to this. And it's like, man, some people are just like, man, I'm tired of living in a city where the electricity you don't know if the electricity is going to work tonight. It works in the houses of the rich people who are up on the hills, right? But it doesn't work down here, and that's not fair. I want to go to a place where at least when I turn on the light switch, I know that the lights are going to come on. I want to go to a place when I turn the water on, I know the water's on. And these are urban, modern, quote unquote places where they have these issues of corruption. They have these very systemic issues of governance, where there's certain people who don't want to live under that. Then they love their heritage, they love their culture, they love their language, they love their food, they love their people, but they don't like living in a house where they don't know if the lights are going to be on the next day. Right? And that's just a reality of the situation. The lights in your hotel are going to be on, I guarantee you. Right? Your Wi-Fi is going to work, I guarantee you. Right? You're going to have food, I guarantee you. Right? But that's not the case for everyone everywhere in Africa. Right? You're seeing the part that is the most welcoming to you, because they don't want you to go back to the place where you came from and be like, oh, that place was, this happened and that happened and this was bad and that was bad. Like, it's an identity thing, but it's not as cool as you think it may be. And a lot of that cultural stuff that you take as being like, this should be happening every day, it doesn't work like that. Not in the urban centers. It don't work like that. Right? There's not drum circles every day. There's probably more drum circles in your local neighborhood than there would be in any particular city in Africa in terms of an urban environment. Right? People are trying to hustle. People are trying to make money. People are going back and forth to work. The cultural aspect is there, but it's not necessarily something that they're participating in every single day. People are walking around in Jordans and Gucci shoes just like over here. Right? And they might rock a kente cloth or some type of tribal outfit when there's a wedding or a ceremony or something like that. But on a daily basis, I mean, they're rocking Armani jeans and a Gucci shirt just like you. Right? So they're not walking around dolled up looking like Coming to America every single day. That's not how it works. Right? To flip and go to Japan, that's not how Japan works either. Right? There's certain people in Japan who don't care about Japanese traditional culture. It's not part of their life. It's never been a part of their life. They don't care about samurai swords. They don't care about kabuki dances. They don't care about Noh theater. They don't care about Japanese poetry. They don't care about origami. They don't care about bonsai trees. They don't care about all of that stuff that we look at as like, oh, Japanese culture. They're like, man, I don't care about none of that. Like, I want to go to get a beer, right, and go get some Korean barbecue, right, and watch maybe watch some sumo wrestling or watch this basketball game, right, and go play some soccer later on. It's like, but aren't we going to do samurai swords? I'm like, I'm not going. I don't know nothing about no samurai sword, right? I'm not going to watch no anime with you. I'm not going to Akihabara with you. Like, I'm going to go to this karaoke spot. We're trying to holler at these hoes, right? So, culture is what you make of it. Fortunately for me, I had this father to bring it back. The first thing that my father gave me as a child were two things. He gave me a Japanese samurai sword, and he gave me an African djembe drum, a little small one. And those are the two things that I had, that my father gave me, because they represented both sides of what my father was. My father did martial arts, Japanese martial arts, since he was 14 years old, right? In the projects of Chicago. He was born and raised in Chicago. And his early life was all about martial arts, the Japanese martial arts. He opened karate schools. He trained in every Japanese martial art you can think of. He was an expert in it. It was the family business, literally. And so he was completely immersed in Japanese culture as it relates to the martial arts. A lot of Japanese culture is tied up into the martial arts. The aesthetics, language, the religion, definitely. A lot of the spirituality, a lot of the things that you see kind of balled up in things like anime or kind of some more the stereotypical kind of stuff when you think of Japan. A lot of that stuff is tied up into the martial arts very directly, right? And my father was immersed in that, and he immersed his children in that. He immersed his friends in that. He immersed his family in that as much as he could, right? The other side of my father was that he was very much so connected to African struggle, African tradition, African American struggle, right? As much as he could possibly be, connecting with the culture, right? He played African drums. One of the first karate schools I remember was directly across the hall from the Mantu Dance Corps, which, if you don't know what the Mantu Dance Corps is, or the dance troupe, it's one of the premier African dance troupes in Chicago for a very long time. And I actually think my father painted their sign, right? And we did demonstrations with them. It was a whole mix of being immersed in African culture. My father's One of his best friends actually ran a store that imported a lot of African artifacts from Ghana. So we were there all the time in his shop, looking at all of these artifacts and stools and statues and cloths and incense and smells and games and all these things directly rooted in Africa. Things that a modern African kid of probably the same age living in Ghana probably wouldn't even see, right? Because it was such a specific section of the culture that most people aren't necessarily interested in that deeply, right? So having all those pieces and parts attached to what I did as a child. So when I grew up always in all these worlds, blending, mixing, understanding. And in that process, you start to see that a lot of these things are the same. They're not better. They're not lesser. They're equal. There's certain things where there's a certain, the way we look at food versus the way they look at food is a difference. But it's not this way is better or that way is bad. It's just a difference, right? And being able to appreciate that difference, but not appreciate that difference for the sake of making you above the next person, but to say, I can participate in both of these, right? And find joy and wisdom in both of these. So from food to language to the martial arts to culture to dancing to everything in between, you start to say, oh, I can see the relationship between kabuki dancing, and I can see the relationship between African tribal dancing, and I can see the way that it was taken this way, and I see the way it was taken that way. I can see the relationship in this religion, I can see the relationship in that religion, all through the board. And to me, a lot of it is the same, right? I don't feel Japanese culture is superior. I don't feel that African culture is superior. I feel like that if you're lucky enough to be able to participate and be introduced to both of them, you'll see that there's more power in combining them, right? There's more power in learning lessons and interpolating and bringing it in all ways, because it's not who did it first, which is one of the myths. Whoever does it first does it the best. It's not true, right? It's not even important, right? It's important for people who want to have this superiority complex, right? We did it first, therefore we did it the best. It's like, it's not true. You made the prototype, but it was trash, right? Or you made the prototype and the next person came along and made it better. So it's more about being the refiner than being first, right? Because none of us could ever be first, right? We're not finna invent a new African culture. We're not finna invent a new Japanese culture. We're not even finna invent a new American culture, right? Everything that we do is going to be a mix. So I'm going to take a little bit of this and I'm going to take a little bit of that. I'm going to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I'm going to mix this together and try and make something new like that. But you can't do that if you're just locked in one culture, right? And your culture is the best and everything else outside of your culture fucking sucks. That's not how the world works, right? That's not how innovation works. That's not how growth works. That's not how anything in this fucking world works, right? That there's one piece and that whoever did it first, that's who did it. Right? So no, it's like we appreciate the people who take things and make them better, right? Who take what you started and build on it, Like I said, it take an African proverb. It takes a village, right? It takes a village. It takes a village. The world is a big ass village, right? It don't take your part of the village. It don't take your side of the village. It don't take the first house that was built in the village. It takes the entire village to come together and create things. So you shouldn't feel afraid, or you shouldn't have the ego to the point where you feel like, I'm not finna go to this place, and since I don't want to go to this place, I don't think anybody else should go to this place. You're going against one of the root and most basic of African proverbs when you act like that, when you say stupid shit like that, because the African proverb says it takes a village to raise a child, right? And in this world that we live in, this super interconnected, interwoven, internet field of we're no more than 20 hours from any other point in the world, right? Any other point in the world is now a village. And you should be able to traverse and go to and experience and involve yourself in as much of it as you possibly can, whether you have money or you don't. Because there's still broke people who travel, right? There's still people who make sacrifices to go to different places at the expense of other things, right? And it's that aspect of it. If you really believe, not you just say shit because it sounds good, but if you really, really believe that the lessons of your African roots are true, then take them seriously. It takes a village to raise a child, right? If it takes a village to raise a child, and at this point in the world, that's the greatest lesson, because it takes the entire world to raise a child. Because now we're in eras of nationalism. We're in eras of people being very much so about homogenous societies and closed borders and the other, and kick these people out, and literally people trying to kill kids in other countries to keep them from growing up in their country and having rights, and kick the dreamers out and build the wall and do all this other shit. That's how you sound as a black person when you spit this Pan-African, fuck everybody else, Africa is better, if you don't like Africa then you ain't shit. Right? You're just as much being a nationalist, right? Just like these right-wing dictators that are popping up in Europe who's saying we don't want anybody from this country or anybody from that country, right? If you really practice African principles, not just put on a dashiki and play a djembe and, you know, pour out some libations and speak some Yoruban chants. I'm talking about if you really want to practice what you preach and its core values and core principles, then practice it takes a village to raise a child. It takes the world to raise a child at this point, and you should allow that to occur. You shouldn't want to hinder that or demean anybody for that or come down on them for that, right? I personally enjoy all cultures. I travel all over the world. I go everywhere. I have an affinity, firstly, for Japanese culture because I was raised in that since I was 3 years old. Was in the karate school, in the dojo, speaking Japanese, kicking and punching, watching anime, watching kung fu movies and Japanese samurai films and all that stuff in Japanese, right? Watching all of this stuff and like gaining an affinity for this culture before I even knew what it was. Can't knock me for that, right? You're not going to blame my mama or my daddy because I'll beat your motherfucking ass. But that's how I was raised. If you were raised watching the Jeffersons and watching documentaries about the Black Panthers and having some type of Pan-African vision of struggle and all this other stuff, that's you. Then yeah, you love Egypt for some reason, and there's something about the pharaohs and pyramids, and for you that's an example of why black people are important. I mean, that, to be honest, that don't mean shit to me, right? Especially as a Muslim, if you really practice your religion, all of that's haram, all of it. If you Christian or whatever, all of that, all of it. You worshiping another. This man was a god on earth? No. Right? You're going to be resurrected with no. This is a spaceship? No. Nah. This is a cat animal such. There's 20 gods? No. Every Judeo-Christian religion would wipe all of that off the planet, just from a religious standpoint. So if you push in that angle, and you like, you're not even supposed to be doing that. So that's one kind of hypocrisy, which is not to blame you for, but if you really, really understand your life and the things that you were trained and learned and taught, then a lot of the stuff that you're trying to do is incompatible, right? But it is what it is, right? I don't let that stop me. I don't let my religion or let my points of view or my own biases stop me from appreciating, studying, understanding, and trying to apply all of the cultures of the world into what I do on a daily basis, right? Whether it be Egyptian heresies, or it be Bali traditions of cleansing, or it be Buddhist traditions of asceticism, or it be white people square dancing. Like, whatever works on a daily basis and is cool with me, then I'm going to try it and I'm going to do it. And I think that you should open yourself up to do the same things. And to cap this and close this, because this is where this kind of comes from, and I guess this is probably the ultimate point. I've never believed what white people say about black people. Never. I've never believed in the political lines and the way Africa was cut up. I do not believe that this person was superior to that person, right? I do not believe that white people had all the answers and that black people had none of the answers. I don't believe in any of that. Because I don't believe in that, and never have and never will, I don't necessarily believe in having to completely embrace very rigidly responses from black people to those type of accusations from white people and white culture. Get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? I don't believe that I'm inferior to a white person. Because I don't believe that, I don't need to champion every single day that black people were the first people on this planet as a response or a defense to white people saying black people ain't shit. Because I know I'm the shit. I know everybody's the shit. I know everybody has value, right? I know that a lot of what you're saying, white people, and when I say white people, I'm talking the conquistadors and the colonialists and all of the racists and all the writings and the people who cut up the countries and people who invaded this country and gave smallpox blanket to this people and took these people as slaves and wouldn't let these people read. I'm talking about that entirety of white people. I'm not talking about a homie sitting on the couch in Kansas City right now, right? Who's a product of that. I'm talking about that whole tradition, which I just label white people, right? I don't believe none of that shit that you said. It doesn't hold true. There's no evidence to it. And because I don't believe it, I don't feel like I need to go out of my way to have a wall full of Marcus Garvey posters or Malcolm X posters or W.E.B. Du Bois books or all of these other kind of, here's a black person doing this, here's a black person doing that, I thought you said we can do this, because I know we can do that shit. I know we've been doing it. I know we'll continue to do it. Right? I know that there's issues of discrimination and institutional racism and people having head starts and shit like that. But I also know that at the end of the day, that shit don't really mean nothing if you really want to put the effort into achieving what you want to do in life. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. You may not have the scale, you may not sell as many copies or whatever the fuck, but you're doing it. And at the end of the day, you can't take none of that shit with you anyway, and you're going to go be with your ancestors. So fuck y'all. Right? I don't need to constantly go back to Africa to find some type of evidence of my greatness or my importance or my value to put that in the face of a white person to prove to them that I'm the shit. And I don't think you have to do that. I don't think that any race of people should have to do that in face of another race of people, because I don't believe that shit. If you believe that, then it might as well be the truth. Right? It might as well be true. If you believe the history of white people telling you that you ain't shit. Alright, so we got cut off. But that was the end of it anyway. So just want to say we got cut off. That was the end of it. I just want to say thanks for everybody that tuned in. I hope there was some clarification. I hope there was some challenge in that. I hope you learned a little bit of something. I hope it kind of pulled back the narrative a little bit about my points of view about Africa, my relationship to Africa. I love Africa, but I also love the entire world. And I'm not defined by a person living in America or a person living in Africa trying to tell me what my relationship to Africa should be, right? Because their relationship to Africa isn't as deep as they fucking think it is, right? So don't you get caught up in that. Take that lesson, apply that to wherever you feel is adequate, to your workspace, to your life, to your school, to the church you go to, whatever you do. Take advice, listen to what people say, but don't ever put yourself in a position to be dictated to by people. Motherfucker trying to tell you should go to Africa. This nigga living in fucking Cleveland. Ain't never stepped foot in Africa. Ain't even got his fucking passport. Right? And keep showing you pictures of fucking Sphinx and pyramids, which is all in North Africa. Right? But don't know shit about anything below, anything in Chad, or he can't educate you on anything in Burkina Faso or Madagascar or anywhere else. He just knows the shit that he was taught in school. So, or read in some book. So, anyway, ran over, man. Appreciate y'all. I hope that y'all are good. Again, shout to everybody who's into Death Stranding and is out there building stuff in the game. I appreciate it. I'm gonna try and learn how to build some other stuff too. Shout out to all my African homeboys and all my friends in the motherland, and at the same time, shout out to all my people in Japan. I will be coming very soon to hang out with y'all. And shout out to everybody else in the world, man. Peace, love, and enjoy this life while you have it, and live your life as deeply and as rich as you possibly can. Do your best to not live by myth or live by misconception. And last but not least, rest in peace to Juice WRLD. Always a great thing to see anybody coming from the streets that I come from, and I know them, to see them succeed and go out into the world and spread that message, spread that joy and that energy to other folks, and empower and enlighten other people's lives, no matter what the medium or the format is. I always love to see that, especially coming from the streets that I come from in the city of Chicago. And it hurts to see that, that cut short. But also everything happens for a reason. And I hope he got an opportunity to appreciate and spread love amongst him and his people. Shout out to Lil Bibby. Shout out to G Herbo. Shout out to the whole squad, to his whole team and where he comes from. Shout out to Steve and the whole city of Chicago. You will be missed, but you will also be put up there in the annals of our memories of doing great things for young folks in the city. And I hope that people learn from your lessons, but also learn from your mistakes, and can build on what you built and build on what you started and create something even greater for the city and themselves. So rest in peace, young Juice WRLD. You feel me? Did all that. And that's it, y'all. If you missed this, it's up on the story. That's it. Peace. Much love to you.